Ugly City, Empty People. With a title like this, I think I should say right away, this video is not an attack on the art style and design of Jujutsu Kaisen and Chainsaw Man, nor is this a video that criticizes shallow character development. This video also would not be me explaining how some part of Chainsaw Man and Jujutsu Kaisen are good, but I just wish they could improve upon certain part. In the end, you might even say this video is not really about Jujutsu Kaisen and Chainsaw Man. It's about me and how I see things. But let's not get ahead of ourselves. Right now, you might be thinking why this video is called Ugly City, Empty People, but not Empty City, Ugly People. This is because this video is actually about a form of reflections on how we view cities, how we see people, and how we strangely narrow the discussions of city and people in a certain way. I also need to mention there might be some caveat in what I am trying to explore, because I've only seen the anime and movie for Jujutsu Kaisen, and for Chainsaw Man, I've only seen the anime. So there might be some informations in the manga that contradict what I am about to say. Needless to say, there might be some minor spoiler ahead. And for those who have never seen both of the show, you will still be able to understand what I'm going to present. There's this really interesting start from Jujutsu Kaisen, where Itadori Yuji, the main character, said he had never seen a ghost before. Not only had he never seen a ghost before, as the story progressed, he was also introduced to the secret organizations of Jujutsu Sorcerer, a group of organizations that dealt with cursed spirit. The reason why I say this is interesting is because throughout all this, the reactions of Yuji was basically non-existence. He never felt surprised or anything. He simply accepted these new dimensions of reality as something that is normal and part of his life. And because of that, it reminded me a lot about the discussions that people had when Re:Zero Season 1 came out. In Season 1, within 2 minutes, the main character already got transported into a isekai, and he has the same emotions as Yuji. Basically, not much emotion. If you cut out the first 2 minutes of Re:Zero Season 1, the show would still make sense. Isn't it weird? In a lot of ways, Re:Zero and Jujutsu Kaisen are two completely different animes, but both protagonists act in a similar fashion. You could also argue Jujutsu Kaisen could be seen as a isekai. Think about it. Mystical power with strange monster and discover the world is actually magical. This is like a isekai. And it is exactly because of that, the first few episodes of Jujutsu Kaisen always stuck into my head. It's like the surrounding of Jujutsu Kaisen is dead. It's not alive. I don't recall Yuji or any character being surprised by the structures of the surrounding. It's even like the only reason why Jujutsu Kaisen took place in Japan is because it was produced in Japan. There is this lack of something that is captivating and attractive to distinguish the world that Yuji was originally in versus the magical world that was revealed to him later. Very much like the high school that Yuji was attending. It was unique. It was exhibiting the Asian aesthetic of Japanese building. The high school was not like any other normal school in Japan. It shapes like a temple or a castle. It fits with the setting of Jujutsu Kaisen, since they were living in a world where traditional sorcerer exists. But there was no one to appreciate it, because there were barely any students. All this beauty, all this design were shown to audience but ignored by the characters. In addition, the school worked just like any other school. It's just a plot device for character to gather together. It served with just a functional means. All this make me wonder, is the city ugly? Again, this is not a criticism about ugly buildings in Jujutsu Kaisen. It is something more. You see, there's this folklore in Japan where there's this yokai, basically monster, called Kasa Obake. It's a monster that shapes like an umbrella. It has one eye, one leg, and one tongue. What's so fascinating about it for me is not its look, but the reason why it exists. Rumor has it, a Kasaobake will only appear after you left an umbrella alone, untouched for 100 years. This is interesting because it informs us that Japanese culture always have a unique relationship with everyday object. There is something sentient within the object that should reveal itself to us rather than we injecting emotions into it. It's not like the monster you see in Western culture, where the monster you see usually take forms from things that is alive. I think part of the reason this happened is because of Shinto, the general religious belief in Japan. What's interesting about Shinto is that it's a polytheistic belief. There is not just one god, but multiple ones. They inhabit everywhere, from landscape to force of nature. Now, why is that important? Because I want to establish a relationship here. Now you know that there is a part of Japanese culture that believe everything is holy because God is everywhere. And you know that Jujutsu Kaisen is a Japanese anime depicting supernatural phenomena. Wouldn't you expect the show to be aware of the surrounding? I'm not saying under such cultural influence means that they should have a cursed spirit which is an inanimate object, but rather, is it crazy to expect the character to have at least one or two scenes that reflect a sense of awe on the place that they were living in? I said that because one of the very first time Yuji actually exhibit emotions in response to all the supernatural things that he has been dealing with was a scene that showed the eeriness of the space. It's only when things become abnormal that the structures of our surrounding could be introduced. In fact, the story of the show actively form associations with unwanted part of the city to demonic being. Graveyard, abandoned building, these should be the things that we should look out for. We should look out for the place that society avoid. And in return, things could only get your attentions again when it is ugly. It is ugly, therefore attractive. You might be asking, for a show that depicts evil spirit, it would be normal to have horror elements in the surrounding to show the grotesque and ugliness of the space. This I agree, but it is only after watching Chainsaw Man that I think there actually lies a much bigger subject. When you look at the very start of Chainsaw Man, the main character, Denji, failed to escape the attack from zombies. With each succeeding stab, he was doomed to be sliced into pieces. What's worth noticing in this midst of chaos is that, in order to balance this extreme violence, both the anime and the manga decided to have a cut that focused on the moon. The lunar light moon acts as a balancing force to restore tranquility to the situations. Nature in this sense was used to reinstall peace in our mind. But what's more interesting is that violence broke out again. Denji revived his dead and sliced body, fighting much better this time with a scary giant chainsaw on his head. This led to bodies of zombies getting chopped. Blood spilled out to every corner of the screen. At this point, it was not a matter of who would win. It's just a matter of when would the blood stop spilling before it leaks into my tablet. Most importantly, what I want to emphasize is what happened after this scene. Because the executions differ between the anime and the manga. In the manga version, what we got is an immediate shot of the buildings where the massacre took place. Then it was followed by the introductions of new characters. There's no breathing moment in between. But what the anime did was deploy the old tactic for all the bloodshed that we got. Sure, you could see some human facility, but the subject of this scene is definitely the tranquility of the mountains. Again, tranquility of the nature. This subtle change for me works so perfectly in contrast with all the gruesome fight that we got. And to my surprise, it is only when I decided to make this video, I realized this scene was on screen for less than 10 seconds. I swear in my memory it was much longer. I thought it was 20 to 30 seconds of stillness nature, but it's not. And this stillness nature has since then occupied my mind for way more than 20 to 30 seconds. This would not be the only time I remember the nature of Chainsaw Man. I also remember there's this really beautiful scene where the whole background is full of snow. The weird thing is, the setting isn't even that important. It could be snowy or not. The main drive behind these scenes is actually the past trauma of the character. I struggle to figure out why I remember these two scenes from Chainsaw Man so distinctively, and this sense of stillness and beauty never happened again. I'm not sure why, but then I noticed that's because the remaining 95% of the runtime, they were inside the city. They were always inside the city. They could be fighting, eating, or fooling around, but no matter what it was or where they were always surrounded by structures designed by humans. It's not like they never had any scenes focused on the city, but I just never paid attention to it. It was filtered out of my memory. But why? Is it because there's no beauty in the city? Is city really uglier than nature? In fact, the very first thing you saw in Chainsaw Man, both in the anime and the manga, was the structure of the city. And both in anime and the manga, the very first sight of the city are not beautiful. It is dilapidated, it is dark and gritty. It's ugly. It's an ugly city. In addition, Chainsaw Man is a story that fills with attentions to detail. The manga has the ability to portray normal mundane interaction as a form of narrative for character interactions and development. The anime adaptation caught that. They noticed the author's intention, which is why in the anime, you have these 2-minute, completely original scenes where the character Aki doing his morning routine. They somehow successfully make a fictional character's morning routine to be interesting and relaxing. And people like it. This always baffles me. If that's the case, why we can't do the same to a city? Why I never found tranquility and felt relaxed looking at the city? Why I could never feel the 20 to 30 seconds in the city? Now with that being said, what's up with empty people? I guess the best way to introduce this idea is by looking at superhero movies. Have you heard of the problem where people criticize more and more heroes nowadays don't actually want to be a hero? The reason why they need to be a hero is because otherwise the world would get destroyed. The battle becomes more and more granular, where you hardly even see the direct impact of saving someone. Lives of millions are saved not because they are important, but because exactly they are unimportant. They are the pawn in chess, a chess piece for dramatic showdown. People exist in the city not because they have special meaning to the place, but because it's a city. How could there be 0 people? They exist by definition. Now here comes why it is even more essential for people to not be empty in Chainsaw Man and Jujutsu Kaisen. In Chainsaw Man, all devils have a name. For example, Gun Devil, Blood Devil. They associate their name with the mind of conscious collective. The devil thrives on the fear of human beings. If the name Gun invokes more and more fear, it will lead to the Gun Devil being stronger and stronger. So the setting for the villain in Chainsaw Man has an indispensable relationship with the people. The menace presence of the devil should have a connection with people's emotion. Again, Chainsaw Man is the anime that got 2 minutes of original screen times of a fictional character's morning routine. It shows how characters use bathroom and ate bread. And yet, we never got that 2 minute screen time for the people. We never know the daily habit. They mostly exist as a background. In fact, no one really cares about them. The very story of Chainsaw Man relies on the simple joys that Denji experienced. That was tremendous that his whole life, what he wants after he gained his power becomes the focus. And slowly we find out each character has their own unique reason to fight the devil. But the only thing that is not unique in their reason is that it's always personal. They don't really care what's happening around them. They really treat their job as a job only, a means to an end. The Public Safety Devil Hunter, a government-associated bureau, really is just like any other form of organization. It's almost like it's just conventional to think the government would be the one who deal with problematic things in society. If the author wants, the Public Safety Devil Hunter could totally be an underground secret organization and it would still work. It's a titular position with no relationship to the people. Ultimately, empty people in Chainsaw Man means it's a city full of them, but a story not for them. Same could be said with Jujutsu Kaisen. In Jujutsu Kaisen, the villains are cursed spirits. They manifest from cursed energy, a form of energy that forms from humans' negative emotion. What's more interesting this time is the fact that Jujutsu Kaisen explicitly told us that there is a strong relation between people and the cursed spirit. The higher the population density, the stronger the cursed spirit gets. There's also this interesting conversation from the cursed spirit. They claim they want to replace humans because they are the real one. Humans are full of lies. They always have something beneath their action, while cursed spirit, on the other hand, is irrefutable truth. The cursed spirit wanted to establish the notion that negative emotion is something that is direct and upfront. You could fake being nice, but hatred is always genuine. They therefore passionately promote the cynical passion. I mean, they even made people on fire. You cannot get any more passionate than that. I always have a thing or two with that statement. Anyway, with all that being said, with regard to negative emotions, where do the people stand in the story? Sure, compared with Chainsaw Man, at least Jujutsu Kaisen had greater attempts at portraying how negative emotions work and how the negative emotions push the character to help the cursed spirit. But just like my title suggests, it's empty people, not person. I want to hear the voice of the masses. Is it really hard to present a narrative as a group? Is it really that hard to find the beauty of a city? For that, I want to talk about the game, a JRPG called Neo's The World Ends With You. Don't worry, I wouldn't spoil much. It's very much like any other JRPG. It's a game about friendship and saving the world. It also is a series that I may talk about in the future. But getting back to the video, let me give you some basic information without spoiling much. Our protagonist is called Rindle. One day, he realized he was forced into a game called Ripper's Game. To participate in this game, he must be in a place called Yuji, which means underground. In Yuji, everything looks the same as the original city that Rindle was living in. The only difference is, in Yuji, no matter what happens, people wouldn't see you. They wouldn't hear you, and they definitely wouldn't help you. But same could not be said with the protagonist. Rindle and his friends can see them, tap into their minds, and help them with their abilities. They could listen to what people are saying. There are also this noise that pops around. They are your enemies of the game. So your usual daily task is to figure out what is the missions of the day. During this process, you could go into some stores to find some clothes to buff up your character, or find some food around the city to increase your stat. And in later part of the game, you could even do something called sound surfing. Before you unlock this ability, you could not sprint in this game. At the beginning, I always hated that I couldn't run. I just wish I could go faster and faster. After all, sometimes it's just missions from point A to point B. But after you unlock sound surfing, not only could you finally dash and sprint, but also it gives you bonus benefit to fight the noise. You do it by matching the dash with the rhythm of the background music, hence the name sound surfing. What a genius mechanic. The way you proceed the game does not always involve you fighting the noise. Sometimes you just have to help someone. And interestingly, sometimes you simply have to answer the right question. Like, what is this building and how is the city connected? Now, why I would need to introduce all these things to you? Because first, I was wrong. Before I started to play this game, I really thought that this game is about teenagers saving the world. Even when I was playing it, I kept this notion in mind. It was until I played till the very end, I realized this game is not about teenagers saving the world. It is not about teenagers saving Japan. Because one word keeps popping up. Shibuya, Shibuya, Shibuya. It's about teenagers trying to save the city. Their city. And they further reinforce this in such a brilliant way. In later part of the game, something happened. Rindo successfully came back to the original world. The only problem is, only he made it. None of his friends were there. It is at this moment, someone called Has came by. He wanted to have a tour around Shibuya. You have no choice but to be his guide. But it is at this moment, you realize you cannot tap into people's mind anymore. There's no more noise around, just you, the city, and the people. You once again cannot run, because you are not in the Yuji anymore. There's no more sound surfing. But the fact that you have to show the city to Has basically means it's just some missions from point A to point B. Yet the fact that I cannot run gave me a chance to slow down and look at the city again. Like, look at this crossing. It's a reference to the real-life busy street of Shibuya. The catching slogan of no music, no life is just like the real tower record where you can buy your favorite album. The jam-packed yet thriving narrow street of Spain Hill is once again crossed by you. And don't even get me started with the weirdly slanted Tipsy Toasty Hall. This building in real life is just a normal building, but in this game, they decided to give this area some character. The Japanese name of Tipsy Toasty Hall has a similar meaning to drunk walking. That's why it is slanted. I still remember the first time I saw this, I was wondering, is this a bug? Is it the Switch console not strong enough to render the place? However, at the end of your tour, the stranger has revealed he could give you a choice. You could go back in time and save your friends again, which would put the life of many and the city at risk again. Or you could just accept the city that you just introduced to the stranger. As if this was not enough, Has had a remark. He said, I also don't understand what's about these cities make it so special. But you do. And if you think that something is truly worth fighting for, then perhaps turning back time and trying again is worth the risk after all. So the focus turns to you. You should be the one who knows why the city is special. To be exact, Rindo is the one who knows why. And his answer is, this time, he is going to save the city and his friends. Because without them, all of this means nothing. Shibuya isn't special without them here. Once again, I felt so conflicted. I know what he meant. After 20 plus hours of gameplay, I know what Rindos is saying. Without your friends there, the city is not alive. And yet, I also felt so betrayed by the message. What do you mean, without them, all of this means nothing? People are still here. The city is still here. The weird slanted tipsy-toesy hall is still here. And at this point into the game, you have helped and tapped into the mind of so many people. At this point, you know which noodle is not on the menu of Suju's Love Shop. You even know what is the slope of Dogenzaka, one of the districts in the game. The answer is 3 degrees. You practically know the city. You know the people. Is the city alone not beautiful enough? Are the people not worthy enough? Why would you say Shibuya isn't special without them here? And would we say the same to nature? If Shibuya, a city, is replaced by the forest, like Amazon, does it still work the same? Amazon isn't special without them here. Would that be a bit too human-centric? Again, we are part of nature, but against nature, we lose a bit of beauty. We are a bit more empty. Let me ask you something else. What are the antonyms of hike and picnic? I've tried to look it up online, but I am not satisfied with the result. And oddly, one of them even includes the word murder. When you look at Google image for both of the words, you would realize nature is always present in those activities. But what are the urbanized versions of those words? The closest one in my mind is sightseeing, which oddly speaking, by definition, is a word that you use when you are traveling. It's like saying that the only time you will look into a city is a city you don't belong. I mean, I've heard of this joke. When being asked how many New Yorkers are in the Times Square, you should always answer 0, because only tourists would go there. We are always trapped by the city that we don't want to look at, and we look at the city where others are trapped in. Similar things for our fellow human beings. A lot of people would be fine spending the vacation 1,000 miles away in Africa for animal safari while watching a movie on a plane that talks about how human being is the virus. On the other hand, the tension between city and people is always interesting. The Eiffel Tower and the Pyramid of Louvre Museum might attract many nowadays, but at the very start, they were always criticized for being eyesores to the Parisian. Somehow, with passing time, people in Paris just seem to forget about it or being forced to love their own creation. The tension between city and people is even more interesting if you look at the history of the past. Without much knowledge, just by looking at this photo, you already know this is not something that was built by people in America. You might not know the original country of these pictures, but you could at least guess it is in East Asia. The cultural surrounding of the people shape the structures of the past. But when you are looking at the buildings of Chainsaw Man, you can't quite say the same. It looks like any advanced cities in the world. You can't really blame Chainsaw Man for doing that, because it is trying to depict modern-day real-life Japan. What you can say, however, is modern-day city all around the world is converging with the design. I'm not sure is this a good thing or a bad thing, but what interests me is that they all look so similar, but at the same time, they don't. For example, this is not San Francisco. It is Vancouver. This is not Washington. This is Vancouver. Vancouver is everywhere in the movie industry. It is always used as a movie set for other city. This prompts a really interesting question. If Vancouver could be disguised into many different cities, then does that mean there is no uniqueness to each of the city? Or is it the fact that they need to make an effort and purposely hide the existence of Vancouver means that there is beauty to each of the city that we see? Or is it we are using the wrong metric this whole time? We don't need to know the beauty mark of a city for it to not be ugly. The city itself is beautiful enough, and so as the people. I said that because, to be honest, I'm more than halfway full into the video. But I still haven't mentioned one of the major reasons why I made this video. It was all due to a speech I heard long time ago. It was a speech from Ram Dass. I don't know much about him, other than the fact that he helped to push the New Age movement. And unfortunately, I couldn't find that speech again. But I did find a similar quote. It goes as follows. When you go into the woods and you look at trees, you see all these different trees. And some of them are bent, and some of them are straight, and some of them are evergreens, and some of them are whatever. You look at the trees and you allow it. You see why it is the way it is. You sort of understand that we didn't get enough light, and so it turned that way. And you don't get all emotional about it. You just allow it. You appreciate the trees. The minute you get near humans, you lose all that. And you are constantly saying, you are too this, or I am too this. That judgment mind comes in. And so I practice turning people into trees, which means appreciating them just the way they are. What he said applies to what we saw. You need to be pretty, you need to be likable, you need to be good looking, or else anything that is not that would make us judgmental. But what interests me more from this quote is the fact that could we say the same to the city? I have seen all kinds of buildings both offline and online. And what's so special about them is the fact that someone once put in the time and effort to design them. But the way we judge them is oddly not like people or trees. You seldom hear people complain, this building is too thick, this is too tall, this is too short. We will not have a judgmental mind, and yet we also could not appreciate it like how we see trees, like how we see nature. So this made me think, in order to make the inconspicuous comes to light, in order to let the city shine, maybe we should change how we construct a narrative. I forgot, is it David Attenborough who once got asked, why is there so many documentaries about wildlife, but there is none for human beings? When there is documentaries involving human, it is always about the history, the artwork, their food, and their culture. We cannot do it the way we like as nature. I remember David Attenborough answer. He also pondered this question a lot, and ultimately, one of the conclusions that he came up with is, if we need to investigate human life as we do with wildlife, then there is this one aspect we cannot ignore, which is mating. It would simply be too graphic to depict. It's okay for animals to do it, but it's too much with people on screen. But years after I've heard this, I think I finally found one. A documentaries that depicts human life like creatures in the jungle. A documentaries that replace forest with city, animal with people. A documentary that really did try to depict sexual act between humans in one scene. The name of this documentary is called Copenhagen Dreams. Copenhagen is a city that I have stayed in for a few months. I thought maybe with this documentary, I could see beyond ugly city, given that I have a bit of history with this city. The documentarian style of content also let us focus on non-linear narrative. There is no one singular protagonist to look at. They are just people for you to understand. I thought this time it might not be ugly city and empty people anymore. What you are seeing right now is a scene from Copenhagen Dream. The camera really just stood there and stayed still. I've talked about the city a lot in this video, but I always look at it from a macro level. I'm always looking from the outside. But we live inside a city. We are inside a building. That's where we are 90% of the time, inside a structure. So what dawned on me when I saw this scene was the fact that there really is nothing to look at. It's dull. It's boring. If this is a documentary about wildlife, this would be the shot where we were looking at the natural habitat of the animal. It's beautiful when it's nature, but with human structures, I just can't do it. But there's one thing I didn't show in this scene. There's actually audio in the background. The camera slowly turned away and locate the source of the sound. What were they talking? Work, I suppose. Again, if this was wildlife documentary, this would be the scene where the cameraman tries to locate the bird on the tree. But when you hear the bird chirpings in the forest, you will feel the forest is alive. It's a vibrant forest. But just hearing someone talks about work in an office just makes you feel a bit empty. Don't get me wrong, I actually really like this documentary. I like it exactly because it really shows the contrasting feeling of living in a human society. There are moments in this documentary where it feels lonely and yet sentimental, personal and yet distant. The narrator also really acted like a commentator from the outside, as someone who is not part of human society trying to illustrate the behaviors of humans.
Julia has yellow curtains in her bedroom. When she wakes up in the morning, for a brief moment, she thinks she's lying in a field of sunflowers. Later in the day, the sun reaches the corner room, and in the afternoon, she can sometimes see reflections on the wall when a window is opened across the street. When Alba goes from school to her mother's home in Nerbo, she changes to bus number 3 at the Triangle. When she's going to her father's home in the city centre, she continues with bus 6A past Kongens Nytorv, Slottsholmen, Torvaldsen Museum, and Eidsved's horse riding circuit.
The weird thing is, you always don't know who you should focus in this documentary. Is it the foreground or the background? Is it the structures or the human interaction? There is something that just seems a bit separated. It's like the city doesn't care about the people, and the people don't care about the city even when they are directly addressing how we should design the city. It is fascinating to look at certain part of the city and be mesmerized by it, just to realize this also is part of the city, but I found no beauty in it. In regard to the people, it's finally a chance for the people to be seen. Their interaction should grab my attention. For example, in this scene, it seems like an interesting encounter, where seemingly a photographer was trying to find a model on the street. If this happened to you in real life, you would tell others about this cool encounter. But in here, I'm not sure where should I look at. Is it the human or the city? This would never happen if I'm watching a bird on the tree. They are supposed to be one thing. There were also others who talk about things like money. It seems like she was trying to get some financial support. If this is a fictional story or real life, I would pay a lot of attention to why she needs the money. But in here, it just seems like another random situations. When I am looking at the forest, there's no extra meaning behind it. When I'm hearing the bird chirp sound, I don't actually know what it was trying to say. But it doesn't stop to fascinate me. But when I'm looking into the city, we could discuss a lot of things. Is this a cubist structures or Gothic design? Etc. etc. When I'm hearing human conversations, I know what they are trying to say. I know the meanings of the sentence, but somehow I wouldn't pay attention. An inversion occurs. The meaningful is so meaningful that it renders meaningless. The meaningless is so meaningless that it renders the meaning of being alive. Is that it? Ugly city, empty people. Is that the conclusion that I could only get after all this? Originally, this was what I thought. This would be the end of the video. But then I realized, what if I'm looking it at the wrong way, at the wrong angle? What if the city is supposed to be ugly? If not, I'll be doing something wrong and sanitizing it. What if the people are empty, and in doing so, it helps us recognize something deeper? What you are seeing right now is a scene from the movie Drifting. I got the ideas for this part of the video while I was making one of my previous videos that talks about Hong Kong cinema. The reason why this part of the city looks so unappealing is because this is the area where people with low incomes live. When you are looking at photos like this, you should not try to convince people that the city is beautiful. We need to understand by saying that this is good and perfectly fine would just be whitewashing. And there is something I didn't mention in my previous video about the movie Drifting. I mentioned that the movie was based on a true event that happened in Hong Kong in 2012, where around 20 plus homeless people got their personal belongings thrown away by police as street cleaners in the name of street cleaning. They did that without any notice beforehand. Some of the things that got thrown away include clothes, family photos, and personal identification card. They were all treated as rubbish, and the homeless people could do nothing about it other than watching their belongings slowly being thrown away. So they demanded a formal apologies from the government and a reparations of about $390 for each individual. In the end, they got no formal apologies and only got back a reparations of roughly $250 for each individual. These were the things that I have roughly mentioned, but there are certain details that I did not say. Details that actually happens in real life. This whole fiasco took roughly more than a year. And within that 1 year, 2 homeless people got disqualified for the right of obtaining the $250 compensation. Technically speaking, disqualification is not the right word because the government never took any direct legal actions to rule them out. The only reason why they did not have the right to get that $250 is simply because they died. They stopped existing. And I don't even know their name. I don't know is there a right keyword to find them out, or it's just simply the fact that they were forgotten, without a trace or name, even on the internet. The only thing I know is they died because of disease. Again, not sure what disease. I couldn't find it on the internet. But is it really the disease fault for killing them, or is it the fact that they were simply homeless? And remember, this happened in 2012. Within a year, 2 out of the 20 plus people got passed away. If the rate is constant, at this rate, basically, all of them have already passed away. So, how is all this related to what I was saying? Remember Chainsaw Man, the devil feeds on the fear of human. And they got the names and strength from how fearful the world is. So by making this video, it made me curious, what kind of devil would be in the future seasons of Chainsaw Man? Then I saw something that puzzled me a bit. The first reason why it puzzled me is that, apparently, there will be a famine devil in the future. If you have seen the start of Chainsaw Man, you know that Denji is basically homeless. He couldn't even have enough food, let alone good food. That's why when he got the chance, he joyfully ate his food. But the reason why this puzzled me is the fact that there will also be a world devil. This puzzled me because I found out that the reason why there would even be a famine devil in the first place is because this is a reference to the 4 horsemen in the Bible. This got me thinking, will the inclusions of the famine devil serve no relationship with Denji past and simply is included because it is a cool reference? After all, Chainsaw Man is a manga about fighting devil. It could very well just be another cool thing to do, to deepen the lore a full includes the myth of other tradition. I guess I could only wait for the future seasons to find out. But for now, the inclusions of War Devil still puzzle me. Because in the first season, one devil's name always got mentioned, which is the Gun Devil. I always thought that the reason why people are scared of Gun Devil is because of warfare. But then, I realized the War Devil exists. This made me reevaluate and think, as a Japanese creator, what pops into the mind of Fujimoto that forced him to think Gun Devil should be one of the main focus in the story? Is it because the mere idea of a gun sounds scary? Going back to Neo the World's End with you will find out someone is missing. Or should I say, a group of people is missing. What I am referring to is, of course, homeless people. The reason why you would not find them, I guess, is largely due to the fact that there are almost no homeless people in Japan. But do you know what's even rarer? The shooting incident in Japan. It is practically non-existent. This just makes you wonder why Fujimoto, as someone from Japan, would choose Gun Devil as the main focus at the very start of the manga. Is it because it's a gun? Of course people would be afraid. If such instinctive thought is the reason, then it reminded me how, statistically speaking, you would more likely to suffer from a car crash than a plane accident. And yet, it's always the plane accident that grabs the attentions of the masses. Going back to reality, there is no shortage of fear of being poor. Just from 2023 alone, there are already more than 2 million deaths which are related to wealth inequality. The number is still rising, and we are just counting the death of children. This is extra mind-boggling when you realize the creation behind. Fujimoto himself was poor. He was living in a cheap apartment with his girlfriend. What's more, a quote from Fujimoto said, "Observe the young generation. They don't seek to have a very big income. They are fine with 350,000 yens. They want to live a simple life, day by day." That's why I created Denji, whose ambition is extremely low. This is why Denji was literally being chased after by loan sharks. Denji was poor, but did Denji feel fearful about his situation? I honestly don't know. It seems it comes so close and yet still misses the point. It's almost like being poor is a given and there is nothing to be fearful of. A blind spot in creation. For example, if you look at the type of devils in Chainsaw Man, like ghosts, blood, gun, and a giant chainsaw, you realize those are fearful things that you could resonate within the first glance. They all trigger intuitive emotion. But don't you think this kind of understanding toward fear is a bit narrow? It's always immediate. It's always straightforward and easy to understand. It's a horror movie with jump scare only. Therefore, I feel like there's this invincible wall shielding both Denji and Fujimoto to recognize their fear, stopping them to be legitimized. There are devils that exist but shall not be named, because, unlike Chainsaw, poverty won't kill you immediately. It bogs you down slowly and surely. Unlike Chainsaw, poverty is not easy to understand. You could be working 18 hours a day and still think you are lazy, just because you are behind on rent. And unlike Chainsaw, the word poverty would never show up on your autopsy report. The murder weapons is most likely disease, while the murderer is nowhere to be found. And if you are unlucky enough, it might even get you before you get that $250. So I've been saying a lot about Chainsaw Man, but what about Jujutsu Kaisen? In Jujutsu Kaisen, there is this character called Kanto Nanami. He is the personification of frustrated workers in Japan. In episode 9, we were informed that He once quit being a sorcerer to work in an office. He expressed that the reason for his return is not because he liked being a sorcerer, but because being an office worker or being a sorcerer are equally bad. So he might as well choose the one that fits him more. Again, this is the lack of ambitions that Fujimoto was talking about. It's a form of negative emotion. This links me back to the conversation that the cursed spirit was having. Remember how the cursed spirit promote themselves as being the genuine one. Negative emotion will not lie, and they have nothing to hide. But is that really the case? You know how people will use the things they consume as a way for escapism? This poses an interesting question. What if the cause of your negative emotion is your work? When you are busy working, you don't have time for your emotion. When you are back at home, you are busy escaping. There's no time nor place for negative emotion. It's also not straightforward and easily identifiable. Like the example the cursed spirit gave, who should you hate and kill if your frustrations from work is working a minimum wage job? And sometimes, while I was writing this script, I even would have the idea, maybe, both shows are purposely dumping down the concept. Maybe working as a manga artist in Japan is enough for them to know negative emotion is so much more complex. Maybe it's easier to turn off your brain if you look at the beautiful design of a chainsaw.
Poverty,
Devil,
homeless,
devil, they sound too real. I would have nowhere to escape if you don't censor their name. So maybe negative emotions also hide beneath. If you want to know where the devil dwells, you don't need to look into the schools and hospital. You just need to look out. It's out in the streets. Look at the ugly city, because it is there where you can find the empty people. Your voice always get neglected. In fact, we ignore them so hard that there are two popular anime that talks about negative emotions, but never mention them. Kind of. I want to talk a bit more about Kanto Nanami. There's this one scene where Kanto was in a dangerous situation, and in the midst of this danger, he got a flashback. We saw him buying a bread at the bakery. Everything seems normal at first, but behind the pleasant smile, there seems to be something more. Maybe she was also slowly building up some pent-up emotions. Anyway, we realized this was the period when Kanto was working in the office. He was teaching the new employees on how to work, but something wasn't quite right. He questioned his superior ethics and challenged him on the idea of making profit as the first priority. But the thing is, he also struggled to delineate his ideal life from money. Money became the only thing he thought of. Then we got back to the bakery again. This time, there was something about the girl's response. Kanto opened up and talked about how his job is to make the rich people richer. Even if he was gone, no one would care. But if the bakery is gone, people would be sad not being able to eat the bread. Therefore, he felt strange that somehow his job got paid more. I always remember this part from Jujutsu Kaisen, because what he was experiencing was definitely alienation from his work. But looking back on this scene, I noticed I missed the response from the girl. She talked about how her shoulder was stiff. We, the audience, knows that it's because of the cursed spirit on her shoulder. But the girl's response was the response that got Kanto reflect on his own work. I realized the cursed spirit on her shoulder was a metaphor for work injury and frustrations from the workplace. That's why Kanto started his monologue. Because people cannot see cursed spirit. Just like people cannot see the importance of bakery if it is present. They can't see the burden behind the girl's smile. So when I rewatched the scene, but Kanto decided to get rid of the cursed spirit, and the girl came out to the store to say thank you. The word thank you just hit a bit different. Then, the sun shined down to show the true color of the city. What a beautiful city it is. Because in that moment, I realized it lied on episode 9. In that moment, there were no empty people. Because one regained her true smile, while the other found his purpose in life. There was once again color in their life. And unless we help others to find their colors, otherwise, with them, no city will be special. Until then, this will be ongoing. So I think the message is strong enough in the last bit. I don't need to add anything else. Remember to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell. Bye.